Rabbi Sai, welcome back to Yerushalmi Eruvin. We are holding at 39a, right at the bottom. Yeah, Tal 39a, right at the bottom. Now we had an argument in our Mishnah about someone who leaves an Eruv in another town. Right? Because according to Tanna Kama, he's like the people of the town. He measures his tchum from beyond the town. According to Rabbi Kiva, he's not like that town. He measures the tchum from where the Eruv was put down. Now, Rabbi Yisrael bar Nachman and Shem Rav Chanina, Ma'apelikin, so where they're arguing, Bishanaznu Eruvin Beplatia. They're arguing where the person who's from the other town puts his Eruv right in the public square, in the middle of the town. So Rabbi Kiva holds, you measure the tchum from there. Rabbi Naznu Eruvin Babatim, you put it in the house in the town. Rabbi Kiva agrees, right, you are like one of the town, and you measure the tchum from beyond the town walls. Rabbi Bara Papi Bai, he asked on Rav Chanina, imagine all the alleys in the town joined together, right? One shituf. But Naznu Eruvan, and someone from the outside the town put their Eruv Beplatia in the big public square, but they've all joined out. So like commission of Eruv, but Batim, isn't it like putting it in the houses? Because they've all joined up as one. The whole town is considered like one house. So according to Chanina, in this situation, Rabbi Kiva should say you measure the tchum from beyond the town, like the case where you leave it in the house. But the fact that Rabbi Kiva didn't make any distinction to measure the tchum from where he just said you measure it from where the Eruv is. It sounds like in every situation where the Eruv is in the town, you measure from there the tchum, whether they've all joined up together or they haven't joined up. So therefore, there's no distinction whether the Eruv was in the square or in the houses. Rabbi Kiva always says you measure from where the Eruv was actually put down, and not the way Rav Chanina said it. Now we're discussing the Tanna Kama that if you leave your Eruv in the town, in another town, you're like the town, and you measure your tchum from the border of the town. Imagine a town, you put your Eruv in a town which is now ruins. There's no one living there. They've all left it. But the walls are still in situ. Rabbi Lazar says, you can still, this Chachamim holds, you can walk out through the whole town and 2,000 from the border, from the wall of the town, because it's considered like 4 amas, the whole town. Shmuel says, no, you only have 2,000 from where the Eruv was put. Because basically there's no one living in this town. You can't call it a town if there's no one living in it. So you measure the tchum from where the Eruv is. Rabbi Baba Kahana Rechir Barashi B'Shem Rab, and also in Eruv B'Dira B'Saha, if you put your Eruv in places which are walled but made to put your animals in, Mahalech Kula, you can walk the whole pen, or as it were, or the enclosure, but 2,000 hours beyond that. Now, now your animal enclosure, no one's ever lived there, and yet Rav holds, you leave the Eruv there, you can measure the tchum beyond that area. So you see, he holds like Rabbi Lazar, that if you leave your Eruv in an area which is surrounded by walls, you measure your tchum from outside that area, even though there's no one living there. Anyway, the people do measure their tchum from the edge of the city, we said. Now the Gemara brings a brisa which says, where is the edge of the city? What happens when there's a difference between the outer row of houses and the wall of the city? Now, Chadasha, we'll see soon what that is, but like a new town, Maided Min Abatim, you measure your tchum from the row of houses like the last row of houses in the city. V'yeshana, an older one, Maided Min Achayma, you measure from the actual wall which surrounds the city. Ezi Chadasha, Ezi Yeshana, what's considered new, what's considered old. If you build the houses and then you build the wall, Zui Chadasha, that's considered a new town. And Bana Chayma, if you build the wall and then Vachach Bana Batim, then you build the houses, Zuhi Yeshana, that's considered an old town. Right? I think Bavli says the opposite.
The Gershom is also the opposite.
Opposite, yeah. Okay. Rav Zeira, he argues, he says no. Bein Zu, whether the houses were built first, or the wall was built first, it's considered Chadasha. And you measure the tchum from the houses and not from the wall. Ve'ezehi Yeshana, what's the Yeshana where you measure from the wall? Kol Shahibad Yurin, if there were residents for Charvu, and they've left that place, and it's now the ones who live near the walls have left their houses, even though we measure the tchum from the wall, because there was a time when the town was settled till the wall, and that's where the tchum is measured from. Okay, Rav Zira Kedate, Rav Zira like his opinion elsewhere. This Palgun we have machlokes. Bono Tisha. Imagine you build 9/10 of a wall l'shem kappa for the sake of an area, an enclosure, but there's no residence. Ve'achad, and then one part of the wall you build l'shem daya for the sake of residence. One part of it for the sake of residence near that part of the wall. Arula zafila bona asiri l'shem daya. Even if you build the 10th one for the sake of living in hareu kedaya, it's considered the whole area surrounded for living in. Rav Zira Amar, he said ena kedaya. He says no, it's not considered as if it's surrounded for living in, even though part of the enclosure was built for the sake of people living in, but the other parts were not. So they're not secondary to it to be considered as if they were built l'shem diurim. And this Rav Zira is like his view that was explained in Chadash and Yeshana, just like he held. The bit for the diurim you don't follow the rest of the enclosure. Different parts that do different dinim. So when the houses don't reach the wall, the area between the wall and the houses is not hukaf ladira like the rest of the batei ha'ir, and therefore you measure the tchum only from the outer row of the houses of the town. Even if part of this enclosure was done for the sake of living in, it brings everything after it. So the whole hekef, the whole enclosure is for the sake of living. And according to him, the inner bit near the wall is considered part of the town. The tchum is measured from the wall of the town. Now we had an argument, Chachamim, the Tanakh and Rabbi Kiva, where you put your eruv in the town. The Chachamim hold you measure the tchum from beyond the town, like one of the people in the town. Rabbi Kiva said you measure your tchum from where the eruv actually is. Rabbi Kiva, do you not agree to me? Imagine you put your eruv inside a cave. You have 2,000 amas. That's it. The cave is not considered 4 amas. Although it's surrounded by walls, the cave is not considered 4 amas. So you should say the same. You put your eruv in the town, you should have 2,000 for where the eruv is. When do we say that even if the eruv is in an area enclosed, you measure it from the eruv and not from the walls? This man shame but the urine. When there's no one living there, this man shesh but the urine. When there's people living there, you've got the whole area of the area and 2,000 beyond that. So in a cave, no one lives there. Right? Yeah, in the old days, you're right. In Derbyshire, you'll find those caves and Paul's Cavern where you find people living in caves, but generally they didn't. So therefore, in a cave where there's no one living, you measure the tchum from where the eruv is. But a city where there's people living there is considered as like one of the town. Therefore, it's considered the whole town like 4 amas, and you measure the tchum from the border of the town. There's a leniency inside the cave than on top of the cave. If you leave your eruv within the cave where people live, then you measure the tchum from outside the walls of the cave. If you leave your eruv on the roof of the cave where no one lives there, then you measure the tchum from where you put the eruv down. Now, not in every cave do we say that it's treated as 4 amas. And you're measuring the tchum from where you put the thing down. Sha'amru, nice in the apay mama, they give you 2,000 amas. What they mean is, sha'afilu seif midasai, kala b'ma'ara. If your 2,000 finishes in the cave, you're allowed to go only to that place. You can't go the rest of the cave. So if you're outside, wherever you put your eruv, and we say you give 2,000 amas, it might stop in the middle of the cave. Then you'll have to stop there. Now, Amar and Rabbi Kiva says, yes, abidingly. Do you not agree? Look, if you leave your eruv in a cave, you have 2,000 from where you put the eruv. And they said, yeah, we agree if no one lives there. But if someone lives there, then you have 2,000 from the edge. Now, there is a situation where no one lives there, but the whole thing is considered as 4 amas. Let's see. Rabbi Yaakov Barach B'Shem Rabbi Lazar. Kalu HaKohen Shvisa B'Kapav. There is a leniency if you put your Shvisa, where you want your Shabbos to be, in an area, an enclosure without people living there, where you were there. You were actually there when Shabbos came in. Min Anois and Eruva B'Kapav. So it's more lenient than if you just put your piece of bread in this area. Yeah, if you were actually there when Shabbos came in, it's more lenient than if you put a piece of bread down. If you were there, you can walk that whole enclosure and a further 2,000 hours beyond, even though there's no one living there. Whereas, if you put your bread there, then you only have 2,000 from where you put the bread. Okay? So it depends if you put a piece of bread or you were actually there. Rabbi Zirabai, he said, if a person said, look, before Shabbos comes in, I want my shvisa to be in that park, whatever it is, but you haven't got there. Is it like you were actually there? and you measure your tchum beyond the borders there? Or do you say, look, you weren't there. You acquired your shvisa from afar. Do we say it's like you left your Eruv there and you measure your tchum from where you left your Eruv? Rav Chananya brings up Hillel. It depends on Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda. It depends Machlekes Rabbi Yehuda. What is the main way for making Eruv Techumin? Rabbi said, Ika Eruv Bekika. The main proper way of making an Eruv is by putting a piece of bread down. Right? You want to acquire your shvisa, you put down a bread. But there's another way of doing it, by you actually being there when Shabbos comes in. But that's a kula, because they made it lenient for people who are traveling, who don't have bread. Okay, as long as you're there, that will also count. And according to this, but notice in Eruv Bekarpov, if you put your Eruv in this enclosure, then the din is, the main thing is using bread. So if you put your bread there, therefore, the din is, you have 2,000 amas from where your Eruv is. And, also the same thing, if you designated a place and you actually were there yourself, we'll measure the tchum from where you designated, not from beyond the borders. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, he said, no, the main thing is for you to be there. Ika Eruv beraglov. The main thing is for you to be there. Right? You're going to a place where you want to acquire shvisa, you're there when Shabbos comes in, but they're lenient that you don't need to go there yourself, and you can send the shliach to leave your bread there. Therefore, if you said, look, I want my shvisa to be in this enclosure, you could walk the whole area and 2,000 beyond. Okay, now we said there's more leniency if you leave your Eruv within the cave where there's people living than if you put your Eruv on top of the cave. Because if you leave it with the people, if you leave it inside, we measure from the edge, from the entrance, 2,000 amas. If you leave it on the roof, then you just measure 2,000 from where you left it. Gag HaMigdal. Now this is like, what do they call it there? It's like a tower or something. It's a roof, a tower, I don't know, a roof, which is a tower.
It's a tower, yeah.
Tower, which has got people living in. Nidan Keir, it's like a town we've got people living in. They use it, people to live in. If you leave your Eruv on that roof, you can go the whole roof and 2,000 numbers beyond that. Gaga Ma'ara, the roof on a cave, Nidan Kasadas, is treated like fields. No one lives there. So you measure the Eruv where you put the Eruv down, because no one uses the roof of a cave. Mm-hmm. Now, apparently. Now, the Chachamim...
Probably logical.
I don't know. Now, the Chachamim in our Mishnah say, if you leave your Eruv in the cave, or in other surrounded areas, if there's people, you measure the tchum from the edge. Now, what is the get of this people? Mao, do you in Mamish? Do you actually need people living there? I feel a royal to do it. It will just be suitable for people to live there, even though there's actually no one there. We treat the cave as if it's full of water and mud, and it's not suitable for living in, or it's as if it's full of water and it's fitting. This tells me that when it means there's people living there, that means afilu, even it's ru'ya l'diurin, as long as it's fitting for people to live there, even actually if no one actually lives there. Now, although a cave which has got people living in is like 4 amas, but the roof is not 4 amas. The roof is like a field. From this that we told me that the roof is, the people living there, but the roof is like a place where no one lives, and we don't treat that as 4 amas. So you have to say the following case. Ma'ara, imagine you have a cave, an underground cave. Yeah, a cave, it goes underground. Sheeshna shnei psachim. You have 2 entrances, one at the east and one at the west. You leave your Eruv in the cave. If you have between the 2 entrances, 3,999 amas between one entrance and the other entrance of the cave. You can see where this is going? 3,999 amas between one entrance and the other. You're allowed to go along the roof from one side to the other, and 2,000 amas beyond that. The gag, the roof, is not the tchum, is all treated as is 4 amas. The roof is treated as 4 amas. Underneath the cave, there's 3,999 amas, but the roof is treated as 4 amas. However, if there is between the 2 entrances, 4,000 underground, then ein la mimakom eruva. Then when you put your eruv down, you have ela apaima. You just have 2,000 amas like that. We don't say the whole roof is 4 amas. We say you have 2,000 from where the thing was put down. Now, why is that? Why is there such a difference between if there's 399 underground or if there's 4,000 underground? The Gemara explains the reason between it. So it's like this: when there's 399, we say we have extend your border 2,000 beyond. Why? Amrabah, Aspri Reb Zira. Reb Zira explained to me the reason like this. Imagine you leave your eastern entrance and you'll put your shoes on the roof. You leave your eastern entrance of the cave, you put your shoes on the roof, exactly 2,000 amas towards the west side. You hear that? So you're sort of halfway in the cave. You start leaving, walking across from the eastern side without shoes, or you walk with shoes, then you take your shoes off, and you put them 2,000 amas from the west. Now you can come out from the other side of the cave on the western side, and it's still within 2,000 amas of there because the whole distance is 3,999. So you can still come from the other side and get it there. And similarly, if you're going to go from the western side of the cave, and again you'll put your shoes. I mean, they say here putting them on the roof, but distance 2,000 amas from the east side. It sounds like you're not putting the shoes in the cave, you're putting the shoes on the roof of the cave. But you can walk on top of the cave 2,000 up to 2,000, and you'll get your shoes because the distance between the two, even on the ground, is 3,999, right? So Asibra and Nasilan, you can come from the other side of the cave on the eastern side and come and take your shoes. So Minkan Asibra, Minkan Asibra. From one side, you can come outside and walk along the roof. And from the other side, you can come from outside and walk along the roof. And you can walk along the whole roof of the cave. Now, how can I tell you that if you go from Meruach Achas, from one door, on one side, also, how could I possibly suggest that if you come from one side, it's also, but if you go along the roof, Mishtei Rucha is Muta. It doesn't make sense. It can't be that if you come from two sides, it's permitted. It can't be that if you go this way to get your shoe, it's forbidden, and if you go that way to get your shoe, it's permitted. How can that be? Basically, since the two tchumim join together, right, they're like one tchum. So the whole roof is considered as 4 amas, right? And you're allowed to go beyond the roof, another 2,000 amas from each side. So basically, we treat the whole thing, because they merge underground, whatever, they're 3,999 away, wherever they are, they're considered as one.
And you say, again, the whole square is one?
I mean, it'll be a length. I don't know if we'll square it off. This is not like a town that will look at houses. There's no houses here. So it's from this area of this cave, you'll have 2,000 beyond the end. Mm-hmm. That's what you'll have. If the roof of the cave where people are living was 3,999, from one side to the second one, Mahalech is kula, you could walk the whole thing to the same thing, same opinion, and 2,000 amas beyond the edge. If you left your Eruv al Gabe Chaima on a wall of a city where there's people living in the town, Afilu Kama, even if it's very long, this wall, Muta, you can go throughout the whole length of the wall. It's included in the city. People do use the roof of the wall. Imhaya Gaga Shal Ma'ara, if the roof of a cave where people were living was a length of 6,000 amas or more, and you put your Eruv on the west, Mahalech is kula, you can walk the whole roof, and beyond that 2,000, Ardeg Nivroyos. Basically, you dig a hole in the roof of the cave. Like through the digging, you can reach the gag, the roof of the cave, from the cave, and so on. You can make holes in the roof each time. If you're underground, you can make holes and reach various points along the roof. Right? And if you do make holes every less than 4,000 amas, it's like a cave which has got 2 entrances and a distance of less than 4,000 amas. And we said, according to that, you're allowed to go the whole roof and beyond it 2,000 amas.
So you can make a huge, much bigger area.
You're basically making it into 4 amas because each 4 amas you've got access, and since you can go under the ground, therefore on the ground is also okay. An area of the roofs, so I don't know, it's like behind the roofs, something like that. Mahin, what is the din about carrying in them if it's more than two star? Now, the Machlokes Rameir Chachamim about roofs next to each other, are they considered one domain or not? Rabbi Yosef Shem Yaakov Barach, Rabbi Nina Bar Pazi B'Shem Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Achai Moti Bar B'Shem Shmuel, Achrei HaGagin Mitatli Bahen, the backs of these roofs you can carry there, Afilu Kur, even if they're an area of a core, Afilu Kurayim, a massive area. So he holds like the roofs are all connected. They're all like one rishus. Rameir, he said, Metalim Ad Beis Hasayim. You can carry on these roofs only if the area is until it's a Beis Hasayim. The warring words which Rav said argue on Shmuel, who said the din of tiltul in the roof is Machlis Rameir Chachamim. He says no, even according to Rameir, you can carry on the whole roof. It doesn't depend on how big it is. To Tanin and Tamar, we learned Kol Gagos Ha'ir. All the roofs in the city of Rishus Achos are considered one domain according to Rameir. And Shmuel Amar, in Rameir, there's an argument. Shmuel said the heter to carry on the roofs is only if the shares are Beis Hasayim, which is Beis Hasayim because the roof is considered an area not set aside for living in. Rava, it can be a massive area. Afilu Kurayim, they're treated like surrounded with walls because of the walls. Okay? Now, and also, the same argument as imagine that the roofs are a massive area, can you carry the whole area or not? The same argument is you find that the carrying on the roofs is like carrying on a boat. Now the boat has sort of turned over and you want to live on top of it, and the floor is now the roof, right, which is like surrounded by walls because of the walls of the boat. So you got Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, according to Rameir, tilted on the roof. They argue about tilted on this sort of boat. According to Rav, Rameir will treat the base of the boat, which is now turned over, as if it's surrounded for living in. And he'll allow you to carry on top of it, even if it's a massive area, more than Beis Hasayim. But Shmuel holds, according to Rameir, you're allowed to carry only if it's until a size of Beis Hasayim. So you have a similar argument there. Okay. Mishnah. Now we're talking about carrying in a courtyard where you have Nachrim, Kutim, you have Gentiles, Kutim, and Jewish people living together. If a person lives with a Nachri in a courtyard, someone who doesn't really agree with the Eruv, because he doesn't believe in the laws of Eruv, then it forbids on the Jew to carry in his house to a courtyard which is shared, and even if the guy or the Kuti will join in an Eruv, it doesn't help. They don't agree with the Eruv. Rabbi Les ben Yaakov, he says, it doesn't forbid carrying. Two Jewish people forbid each other if they don't join up, without making an Eruv. And the Eruv doesn't help when the guy is living in their midst. But if it's a guy and one Jew, it doesn't forbid carrying, right? Because a dira of a guy is not considered a dira. It's not considered living in this respect, So let's see. The Gemara brings a brisa about Machlokes Tanakam Rez ben Yaakov. B'chasa shel Nachri, a courtyard of a Nachri, as far as an Eruv is Kedir v'Sahar shel Behema. It's like an animal enclosure. It's not considered a dira for Hilchos Eruv, and even if there's a few Nachrim there, the Jew can go in and out, courtyard to houses, houses to courtyard. We don't look at these houses as domains of people. It's like one domain. If a Jew is in the chatzah of the Nachri, so what's this? If one Jew was in a courtyard of a guy, the Nachri would forbid it. Reb Les ben Yaakov, this is Brisa we're quoting. If a Jew was in a courtyard of a guy would forbid him. Reb Les ben Yaakov said that no, the Nachri doesn't forbid tiltul until there's two Jewish people forbidding the tiltul. Right, and the halachas like him. So this was a Brisa that we've just quoted. Now this Brisa tells you that everyone agrees that a guy living is like an animal living there. But as Machlokes Tanakam Rez ben Yaakov, the continuation of the Brisa, does a guy's dira, does it forbid on a Jew? So let's see. Masiv in Rabbana, Rabbi Les ben Yaakov. The Chachamim questioned Rabbi Les ben Yaakov. They said, imagine you have a Jew and an animal living together in a courtyard. Right? There was like an animal enclosure there which belonged to some other Jew. Would that be a problem? Shema Eina Behema Iseres. That animal enclosure would forbid him, right? If it belonged to another Jew, it would be. It would be. It would cause trouble. You think it doesn't forbid? It definitely forbids. Because every type of enclosure which someone has in your other friend's courtyard would forbid. So you understand, you've got an animal enclosure belonging to someone else in your courtyard, that would be trouble, unless you join together. Just like the animal enclosure forbids, so also a house of a guy would also forbid. Actually, they do say here, some actually learn the other way around, actually. You think the animal itself forbids? There's no issur, it's only because an animal is in the bias of another Jew. That's what causes the trouble. Not when it's belonging to a guy. Anyway. It says here, according to the Bavli, the Chachamim agreed to Rebbe Ben Yaakov that a guy's dira does not forbid. The reason why the guy forbids is only gezerah. We don't want you to end up living with a guy in the same area, so it's to try and get you out. Yeah, that's the Bavli brings that down. That's the question of the Bavli. Anyway, Master Rebbe Ben Yaakov Rabbanon, if you Jew and animals are living in the same courtyard, would an animal then forbid? A deer of an animal belonging to one Jew in a courtyard with another deer of another Jew, he holds would not forbid a courtyard on the Jew living there. Only a house of another Jew can cause trouble, but maybe an animal's enclosure, he holds is not a problem. So, he said back, no, I don't think it is a problem. Your one Jew's animals and another Jew, I don't think that is a problem. Just like an animal would not forbid the courtyard where it is, so a guy would not forbid. Now, the brisa which we quoted said the halacha is like Reb Ben Yaakov, and that's like the rule that when we are lenient with Eruvin, we are lenient. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, Rabbi Yasser, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan. Now, this is another din about when you're sleeping on the way when Shabbos comes in. When you find yourself asleep, you have 2,000 numbers in every direction where you find yourself. Yeah, that's Rabbi Yochanan Nuri's din. Okay, that's also a leniency that we do give you 2,000 even if you're asleep. Okay, how are we doing? You okay? A few more minutes? Yeah? Now, okay. We said a guy who lives in a courtyard, halacha base, a guy who lives in a courtyard forbids carrying on other Jewish people in that courtyard. Now, a Jew who lives in a courtyard, we didn't join up with the people in the courtyard, he can be allowing everyone else to carry by giving over his reshus. Yeah, he can be mevatel his reshus. He can give up his ownership. With a guy who lives in a courtyard, bit reshus doesn't help to allow carrying in the courtyard. So the Mishnah brings machlokes about one Sadduki, one Sadduci, he was mevatel reshus. Does it help to allow carrying? So Amar Gamliel, one Sadduci was living with us in an alley. He gave over his reshus to us to allow us to carry. The daddy said no good. You should all take possession of this alley straight away. Take your stuff into that alley when Shabbos comes in. So you're taking ownership of it because he's given you permission. Before he should bring his vessels there and retake back his ownership. And when he does that, it would be as if he is nullifying his bittul that he gave you. You understand? Yeah, so you hurriedly get there first. I'm using it, yeah. Take your possession of that area, so that will stop him doing it, and then it's maybe cancelling his giving over of his rishus. But yes, Aleichem, and that would forbid the mavoi to you. But if you do it first, he can't change his mind. Rabbi Yehuda, right? B'lashon acheres, he had it slightly different wording. He said, do all you need to do in the alley, before the Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos comes in, and then he'll forbid you carrying in the mavoi. So don't rely on bittul at all. Basically, just take everything, all your kelim that you need, take him into the alley, because his bittul reshus doesn't help you, according to this view. It doesn't help. Just take your things and take ownership of the alley. Now, we brought just now, this Gemara here, is you can see things have been put in the wrong place. We just spoke about we're lenient with laws of Eruv, and there are other cases of leniencies and so on. And then we come back to that. So this was connected the piece just before this Mishnah, right? The Gemara brings the sugya we're discussing Machlokas Yehuda and Chachamim. Remember, Kaira, can you put it above 20 amas? Rabbi Achar Rav Chinna b'Shem Kahana, Ein Alach Rabbi Yehuda. The Nacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, who's lenient. He said you can have a Kaira, your board more than 20 amas high. To Laikain, had you not told me this, what would I have said? I would have said Rabbi Yehuda v'Chachamim, Tei Alach Rabbi Yehuda. Now, do you think I would have said Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda? I mean, he's an individual against the crowd. Why do you have to tell me that Allah is not like him? I would never have said that Allah is like him anyway. Ella begins you just told me with Eruvin we follow the lenient opinion, even in individual. So you might think that Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda. He also said, this is the argument we just quoted Yerushalmi Nuri as someone who's asleep when Shabbos comes in. We ask that you have 2,000 numbers from where you find yourself when you wake up. We know that Allah is lenient with Eruvin. So why do you have to tell me Allah is like Rabbi Yerushalmi when you wake up you have 2,000 numbers? So he says, sovereign maybe people might have thought, yeah, an individual against an individual we follow the lenient one. Yachid is Yachid. Yachid is a Chachamim like, but not when he's against a crowd. Also, Rabbi Yisrael and Nachman, Shem Levi, Allah, Rabbi Yechon, always Allah was like him. Even they argue, when you asleep, you wake up, you have 2,000 numbers. So here as well, the argument of Yehuda and the Chachamim about Korah above 20 numbers, you might have thought, to Allah, Rabbi Yehuda, you think, maybe Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda because he's lenient. So therefore, I have to tell you, Kahana tells you, we don't apply the rule. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Back to our Gemara now. Back to our Mishnah now. We have a story with Tzedaki. He's living in the Mavoi, in the same courtyard as Rabbi Gamliel. And the Gemara brings the situation where one of the courtyards is open to another Mavoi. The people in the courtyard are going from the street through another Mavoi. Imagine a courtyard which has two entrances. Yeah, two alleys on either side of the courtyard. You've got a little diagram here. Two entrances to the alley, to two different alleys. Now, each one goes to a different alley. B'Yisrael v'Gai doin b'tocha. And in that courtyard, you have a Jew and a guy. Then, B'Yisrael and Mahalech HaRogil. With a Jew, you follow the Mogvoy that he is always used to using. He has to join up in the alley with those people of that alley. He doesn't have to go with the one that he doesn't use, right? There's always the shul you go to and the shul you don't go to, right? So he's got the alley that he goes to and the alley that he doesn't go to. So he has to join up with the alley that he goes to, and not with the other mavoi, which he doesn't go to. He's taken himself away from the other alley. He doesn't join up with them. He doesn't use it. Fine. With a guy, you have to also consider a mavoi which he doesn't use, because he's not so careful not to use that mavoi. He doesn't remove himself away from it. He's considered like living in the two alleys, and he would forbid both. So, of course, we'll talk about soon later how we have to buy rishus from him. Yeah. Now, there are cases where even a guy doesn't forbid the mavoi which he's used to be found in. Let's say, imagine you have three courtyards between the two alleys. Yeah, we've got a picture here: alley, courtyard, alley. Yeah, two alleys on the two ends, three courtyards. So now, Yerushalmi Kan. You have the Jew on one side, Yerushalmi Kan, a Jew on the other side. The guy's in the middle one. The guy be'emsa. In the middle courtyard, which is open to the two courtyards on the side, the guy's in the middle. The guy can go through both alleys, through the outer courtyards. He'll reach that alley, Now, for both of them, we look at where they usually leave. Even the guy is careful not to go in a courtyard where he's not usually found, because people will think he's stealing things. You understand? So he's not going to go through a courtyard he's not usually used to going through. Therefore, he's considered he's only living in the alley where he's used to going. We're not going to forbid. We're only forbidding that alley where the guy goes to, and not the other alley where the guy doesn't go to. In Bita Rishusai Haragil. Now, if the guy gave up his ownership in the normal mavoi, which he always used to go, Naseh She'ena Rogil, then now the one that he doesn't go to becomes Rogil, becomes the one that he goes to. And he would forbid the other alley. So if he gives up his ownership to that alley, then we say, right, he must be using the other alley. So you have to acquire his ownership for the other alley. because bit of reshus with the one he's used to going, he's showing that now he wants to use the other one, which until now he has not been going. And the same thing, hiskir reshus harogil, if he hide out his ownership in the normal alley, now she'ena rogil, the one that he's not used to using, becomes rogil, the normal one which he's now going to use. Irev, if he joined up with the Mavoi She'ena Rogil, if he joined up with the Mavoi, the alley which he's not used to going, Lo Huta Rogil, that doesn't allow the one that he used to go, that he does go in. We don't say, by you joining with the one that he doesn't use, it's as if he's moved himself from the one that he does use. No, Gilei Das only helps L'chumra, right? Okay? But we don't say L'kula. So even the Mavoi which he used to use remains forbidden until he joins up with that. Okay. Ger Toshav, a guy who took upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Nach, he's not done Milah Tefillah, the Eved Toshav, or an Eved Nachri of a Jew who's not been in mikveh, but he keeps 7 mitzvahs, or Meshumad Begileh upon him, someone who just breaks Shabbos publicly, Avreu K'Goy L'Chal Davar, he's considered a guy in every respect. Okay. Shall we you stop here, or you want to carry on a bit more? Yeah, we'll stop here, Rabbi. Okay.